Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Sasha stood at a critical crossroads in her life, fully aware that a single decision could bring everything she had painstakingly built to the ground. In the tense, secretive atmosphere of the courtroom, where the darkest secrets of her family were being exposed, Sasha had no choice but to confront a truth she had desperately tried to keep hidden for so long. Her daughter was not only her personal beacon of hope but also a looming threat to those who had designs on harming Michael, the man she had loved and remained loyal to for years. The worst part of it all, however, was the realization that this child, the very symbol of her future, was not only in danger from Michael's enemies but might also become the target of an unending familial battle. Sasha's mind raced as she took in the gravity of the situation. Among Michael's numerous enemies, there were individuals she had once called friends, people she had trusted implicitly. Drew and Willow were two names that filled Sasha with dread. Drew, a man whom Sasha had always considered family, was now deeply entangled with Willow, someone who had become a formidable rival in her own right. Sasha had always believed that Willow, in her unwavering devotion to Michael, would stop at nothing to protect their relationship, including going to extreme lengths to safeguard Michael's interests. Sasha knew the truth: in a world so driven by power and betrayal, no one was above suspicion. What had once seemed like a trusting alliance had now become a fragile thread that could easily snap under pressure. But the danger didn't stop there. The ghost of Sidwell haunted her thoughts. Sidwell, the man who had once kidnapped her, forcing her to live in fear for her life. He had terrorized her, forcing her to make unimaginable decisions under duress, and now he lurked as a potential threat to her child. Sasha's stomach churned as she recalled the dark days when Sidwell had controlled her every move, his manipulations pushing her to the brink. But what was worse now was the thought of her daughter, an innocent child, being dragged into this dangerous web. Sidwell was no ordinary adversary. He was a ruthless individual with nothing to lose, capable of anything to achieve his own ends. Sasha knew better than anyone that people like him were capable of unimaginable cruelty, and the thought of her daughter becoming a pawn in Sidwell's twisted game made her blood run cold. Sasha understood the stakes all too well. If she stayed in Port Charles, the web of intrigue surrounding Michael's enemies would inevitably tighten around her and her daughter. There was no safe space left for her in the city that had once been her home. Each passing day brought new threats, each more dangerous than the last. She had no illusions about the lengths people would go to in order to secure their power, and she knew that the child she carried could become a pawn in a war she could no longer afford to fight. The lives of Michael's enemies, the betrayals, the shifting alliances, and the ruthless pursuit of control over everything. Sasha could not bear the thought of her daughter being caught in the crossfire of these ongoing wars. With every passing moment, the decision became clearer. The only way Sasha could protect her daughter, the one person who still gave her hope, was to leave Port Charles. The thought of leaving everything behind, the life she had built, the people she had once called family, was heart-wrenching. But Sasha knew there was no other option. The safety of her child was paramount, and if leaving meant shielding her from the dangerous undercurrents of Michael's world, then it was a sacrifice Sasha was willing to make. The idea of walking away from Michael, the love of her life, tore at her heart, but she knew it was the only way to ensure her daughter's safety. Sasha's departure was not going to be an easy one. The people she left behind, including Michael, would not understand. Her decision would create a rift, one that might never heal. But as much as she loved Michael, her duty as a mother came first. She could not, in good conscience, allow her daughter to be a part of the bloodied battles and power plays that had become the everyday reality of Port Charles. No matter how much Sasha longed for peace and love, she knew the world around her was too dangerous. The ruthless ambition of those who sought to control Michael's empire would stop at nothing to tear apart anyone who stood in their way, and Sasha knew all too well that she and her child would not be spared. And so, with a heavy heart and a determination fueled by love and fear for her daughter's future, Sasha made the decision to leave. She packed her things, said a quiet farewell to the life she knew, and slipped away into the night, knowing that it was the only way to protect the one person who meant everything to her. In the silence of the early hours, Sasha left Port Charles, unsure of where she would go next, but resolute in her choice to disappear into the unknown. It was a painful decision, but one she knew would save her daughter from the chaos and danger that had become an inescapable part of their lives. As she drove into the unknown, Sasha couldn't shake the fear that her decision would only bring more challenges ahead. She had no idea what the future would hold, but she knew she had to keep moving. The enemies who lurked in the shadows of Port Charles would stop at nothing to track her down, but Sasha was determined. For the sake of her child, she would disappear from their reach, willing to sacrifice everything to ensure her daughter's safety. Her journey was just beginning, and she could only hope that the road ahead would lead them to a place where they could finally be free from the dangers that had haunted them for so long. The decision to leave was not one that Sasha made lightly. Her love for Michael had always been undeniable, a constant presence in her life, despite the many complications and unspeakable secrets that clouded their relationship. There had been a time when she believed, with all her heart, that she could protect her family, that she could shield Michael from the enemies lurking around every corner. But over time, the weight of the truth became too much to carry. The reality was clear, she could no longer keep up the facade. Michael had too many enemies, too many people who would stop at nothing to tear apart everything he had built, and the dangers that surrounded them were not just the usual suspects like Drew and Willow. They came from within her own family, from people who had once been close, people she had trusted implicitly. Sasha knew she couldn't continue living in the shadow of so many secrets, in a world where every day felt like a battle for survival. The internal conflict tore at her. Her love for Michael, the longing to keep their bond intact, versus the undeniable truth that their love could not survive in the midst of so much chaos. The world around them was too dangerous, too unpredictable. People like Drew and Willow were just the tip of the iceberg, the real threat lay deeper, in the very fabric of her family. Sasha had to make a choice. She could either stay and risk everything, watch as the threat slowly swallowed them whole, or she could walk away, preserving her sanity and, most importantly, her child's future. She couldn't protect Michael from the world anymore. The lies, the betrayals, the constant danger, it was all too much. Michael's enemies were everywhere. They didn't care about family. They cared about power, control, and revenge. Sasha had tried to shield herself and Michael from the harsh truths of the world they lived in, but she was only fooling herself. The battle for survival had become far too intense, and the cost of staying in Port Charles was too great. The hardest part was that Sasha knew her departure would hurt Michael deeply. She could already feel the ache of the separation in her chest. She loved him, and the thought of leaving him behind was unbearable. But leaving was the only way she could ensure her daughter's safety. Sasha had come to realize that her love for Michael, while real, could no longer outweigh the responsibilities she had as a mother. The child growing inside her was her priority now. She could no longer allow herself to be a pawn in the ongoing power struggle that threatened everything she held dear. Sasha knew that staying would only drag her further into the web of lies and deceit that had already caused so much harm. As she stood on the edge of this life-altering decision, Sasha thought about the child growing inside her. The danger that awaited her daughter was not just from Michael's enemies, but from the tangled web of familial relationships that had become so complex. Sasha didn't want her daughter to grow up in a world filled with secrets, lies, and deceit. She didn't want her child to inherit the darkness that had clouded her own existence. She made a silent vow to herself. She would protect her child at all costs, even if that meant walking away from everything she had ever known. She knew that her decision would devastate Michael, and likely many others. But as painful as it was, leaving was the only option. Sasha had spent so long living in the shadows, hiding from the reality of the dangerous world she was a part of. Now, she had to face the hardest truth of all, her child deserved more than that. She couldn't allow her daughter to grow up in a place where her safety was constantly at risk. Sasha's heart ached as she thought of the relationships she would leave behind, but her maternal instinct was stronger than any connection to her past life. She had to do this, for her child, for their future. That night, under the cover of darkness, Sasha made her escape. She left Port Charles without a trace, without telling anyone where she was going or why. It was the only way to protect herself and her child from the dangers that lurked in every corner of their world. As she drove away, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her chest. The memories of the good times, of the hope she had once held on to, mingled with the fear of what lay ahead. The road was uncertain, but Sasha knew she couldn't stay in a place where she and her child were not safe. As the night swallowed her up, Sasha knew that she could never return. The world she had known, filled with power struggles, familial battles, and hidden enemies, was no longer a place she could survive. She would find a safe place for her daughter, away from the chaos and danger that had threatened to consume them both. But even as she drove into the unknown, a constant fear gnawed at her. Sasha knew that in a world like theirs, there were no guarantees. Every step she took was fraught with danger, and she had no way of knowing who would come after her, or how long she could remain hidden. The only thing Sasha knew for sure was that she had no choice. She had to disappear. She had to protect her daughter. And, even though she feared what the future would hold, Sasha was determined. As the miles stretched out before her, so did the uncertainty. But for the first time in a long while, Sasha felt like she was taking control of her own fate, even if it meant leaving everything, and everyone, behind. Meanwhile, the custody battle between Michael, Carly, and Drew raged on, with each new twist more intense than the last. The stakes were high, and the drama only escalated as personal vendettas fueled the conflict. Michael, caught in the middle, found himself torn between his love for Sasha and his desperate need to protect his family from the wreckage of betrayal and lies. Carly, ever the fierce protector of her children, refused to back down, seeing her right to be a part of her son's life as non-negotiable. Drew, meanwhile, was determined to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, willing to go to any lengths to prove his love for the child he considered his own. This ongoing battle was more than just about custody. It was about power, control, and an intricate web of secrets that threatened to unravel everything. Sasha, watching from the sidelines, realized just how deep the stakes truly were. Every decision, every move made by those around her seemed to bring more chaos into her life. The family dynamics, once so familiar, had become fraught with manipulation, bitterness, and hidden truths that no one wanted to face. There were secrets, many of which Sasha was painfully aware of, that could change the course of this entire custody war. And these secrets were not just personal, they involved alliances, betrayals, and desires for control that transcended any familial bond. The situation was spiraling beyond her control, and Sasha knew that if she didn't act quickly, the safety of her daughter would be at risk. Sasha's mind was clouded with fear and uncertainty. The longer she stayed in Port Charles, the more vulnerable her daughter became to the collateral damage of the ongoing custody war. The family conflict wasn't just about who had the right to raise the child, it was about who could wield the most power, who could manipulate the system, and who would come out on top. Sasha knew all too well that, in the world they lived in, people weren't above using anything at their disposal to win, and that included putting the child in harm's way if necessary. The tangled relationships between Michael, Carly, and Drew were threatening to create a dangerous storm, one that Sasha wasn't willing to let her daughter face. The realization hit Sasha hard: if she didn't leave now, her daughter would be pulled into this toxic cycle of power struggles, deceit, and revenge. She couldn't let her child grow up in an environment filled with constant danger and instability. The thought of her daughter being used as a pawn in a war that was not of her making was unbearable. Sasha loved her daughter more than anything, and she was determined to protect her at all costs. Leaving was the only way to give her a chance at a future free from the constant turmoil that had become their lives. But leaving was not an easy decision. Sasha knew that her departure would not only tear her away from Michael but would also isolate her from the life she had once built. It was a painful and gut-wrenching choice, and the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with dangers. The moment she walked away from Port Charles, she was stepping into the unknown. There would be no more familiar faces, no more friends or allies to rely on. She would have to navigate a world filled with threats, some from people she once trusted, and others from complete strangers who would stop at nothing to track her down. She would no longer be part of the tangled web of family secrets and bitter rivalries. Instead, she would be forced to face a new set of challenges, each one more dangerous than the last. The thought of what she was leaving behind made Sasha's heart ache. But she couldn't allow herself to be consumed by guilt. The safety of her daughter had to come first. This was the only way to ensure a future where her child could grow up without the constant shadow of danger looming over her. Sasha made a vow to herself that she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter, even if it meant sacrificing everything she had ever known. As Sasha packed her things in the dead of night, she realized that this wasn't just an escape, it was the beginning of an entirely new chapter in their lives. A chapter that would be filled with unknown risks, challenges, and obstacles. But it was a chapter that she had to write for her daughter, for their future. The moment she stepped into the unknown, Sasha knew that her journey would be one of survival, not just from external threats, but from the emotional turmoil that would come with leaving everything behind. Every step she took would be fraught with the knowledge that the enemies she had left behind in Port Charles would not stop hunting her. They would not rest until they found her, and when they did, they would make her pay for walking away. But Sasha didn't have a choice. She couldn't stay, knowing that the battles surrounding her would only continue to escalate. She had to protect her daughter from the fallout of the family's ongoing war. And so, with a heavy heart, she disappeared into the night, leaving behind a life filled with memories, regrets, and unresolved pain. Her decision was final, but it marked the beginning of a new and uncertain future. One where every day would be a struggle to keep her daughter safe, and where every moment would be spent wondering if she had made the right choice. The journey ahead would be long, but for Sasha, it was the only path left to take.